Well, hello, hello, hello. Thank you. That's so kind of you. I love coming. Can you hear me all right? I will kind of apologize before this weather has kind of got, the hot, cold, schizophrenic, like, I don't know what it is, and that gets my sinuses going. I don't think I'm contagious. We'll find out, won't we? Okay. No, I'm not contagious, but I sound worse than I usually do, and So anyway, y'all just bear with me on that. Have you ever listened to yourself recorded? And that's the worst thing in the world. Pretty much everybody's that way. That's really odd that you sound so different out here on the air than you do in here in your ear. And it's got to be some good stories about life, or some parallel surely we can make, about that. But everybody is the same. They don't like the way they sound when they're recorded. So, anybody new that I haven't met? Welcome. We got several. 2, 3. Okay, good. My name is Klay. Clay's up there. So I guess that's redundant, but my name's Klay. Welcome. Good to see you guys. And welcome to everybody else. John 3:17. Welcome to everybody out there in Freedom Talk world. We're happy that you're here with us, and we'll see what unfolds tonight. Never quite sure what'll come up, but it's surely something. We've been blessed when we've spent time together. So I assume that will still be the case. So spring is almost here, and that's a neat time of year, because if you think of the seasons as we have them here, the circle of life, okay, can be represented that way. In the winter time, things tend to they really kind of go dormant. We often say they die. It's probably not technically correct, but they sure go dormant. The leaves fall off the trees. The grass gets kind of brownish and ugly, and so we often say it dies. But then the spring, it's like, the Earth Mother starts coming back, and then usually we have these thunderstorms. And in the heritage of Native Americans, those were the labor pains of the Earth Mother, when it would thunder and lightning and rain and stuff, and then green would start coming, and the flowers and the trees would bud, and all of that beautiful. And that's we're kind of on the threshold of being able to see that and experience that. And it reminds me of, birth and beginnings and starting again, starting over. Sometimes people say starting again and starting over. And I'm always reminded of that in the spring. It's fascinating. You can take a seed, that is dormant or dead, and stick it in the ground, and it comes back to life. You ever think about that? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that symbolic of this whole story, this whole journey that we're on? Think of even in the scriptures about dying to self and all that, and we could spin that a dozen different ways, but you think about a seed that is no longer really has much life in it, but if you stick it in the ground and it has water, the appropriate temperatures, and then it comes up and it has sunlight, and it comes back to life again. So the circle of life, from death to life, from dust to dust, okay, from what I am today is into what I will be tomorrow, There's all these circles circulating all the time, and it's kind of a neat thing to remember that. We've been talking, if you remember when I was here last, we've been talking a little bit about the adventure. We may continue kind of with that theme. This 12-step program it's an adventure, or at least this 12 steps are a map for us to follow on the new adventure. And we've set out in a direction that we kind of want to go. There's a place out there that we want to end up, okay, but there's a lot of steps along the way. Sometimes it's easy going, sometimes it's not easy going. Sometimes I trip, sometimes I fall and skin my knee. Sometimes I roll back downhill a step or two, but that's so what? It doesn't make any difference at all, because my aim is true. It's in a good, orderly direction, and step by step, follow this map on this adventure. Okay, it will pay off. It is a spring in and of itself, so to speak. So we've talked a little bit about that. Now, these 12 steps are the beginning of this map of at least coming to terms with the awareness and acceptance of my powerlessness, which does not mean weakness. It means lack of power. Everybody on the planet has lack of power. Across the board, we have lack of power. If we want to specify or get down at least to the context of why we might be here, particularly my lack of power over drugs and alcohol. Other substances, you can fill in the blank, it doesn't matter. But a lack of power is not weakness, and doesn't have anything to do with intelligence, have anything to do with other circumstances. It's simply a lack of power. And coming to grips, step one, there with that reality is a major move. Because I have to get there. If not, I continually stay in the camp of I can do this. And how many repetitions of I can does it take for me to realize or get to the I can't? And the I can't is where I have to live. The I can't is where I need to stay. Because it's in the I can't, okay, that the map can be laid out and exposed to me. As soon as I get to the I can't point, I realize that there is a power that is greater than me, right? I'm powerless, but there's a power greater than me that can and will restore me to sanity. The only insane thing is that I've been trying to do things I have no power to do. Even that's not insane. The insane thing is, as you know, I keep expecting it to work. I keep expecting it to be different, even though it's not. That's where it gets a little crazy. And so step one, I know I'm powerless. Step two, I know that there's a greater power. Step three, okay, which opens up to the practical aspects of everything I'm going to do. Step three is I turn my will and my life over to the care of that higher power, to God as I understand Him. Not God as I create Him, not God as I invent Him, not God as any of that stuff. The original writers, okay, of those steps was that what they were meaning is that there is no level of understanding required of the Great Spirit or of religion or of the concept of God. There's no level of understanding needed, okay, in order for you to turn your willing your life over to. Does that make sense? That's an important aspect of step 3. Okay, but it doesn't matter what I understand about God. And we're going to kind of get into something about that here in just a minute. But those first 3 steps of that map kind of set the stage for our new story. I want to ask you to trust the story. Trust the story more than you trust yourself. Now, sometimes we can relate to not trusting myself. I don't know about you, but I can think some crazy stuff. Maybe you don't, but I can. I can think some crazy stuff. And I feel what I feel. Now, the popular culture will usually lie to you, and it will tell you don't trust what you feel. It's a mistake. You can trust what you feel because you feel it. I mean, it's really there and you feel it. You may not want to act on what you feel always, but you can trust what you feel. It's very difficult to trust what you think because what I think can be crazy. It can be really messed up. I don't trust what I think. I need to check with you and run it by a dozen other people, and maybe I get a sense of, okay, you're thinking all right. So trust the story. Trust these steps. Trust recovery. Trust the program, even when it doesn't make any sense and you can't explain it. And it's not really what you would think about or do. Because that's the way, that's the path, okay, to recovery. That's a path to a new story. That's a path to, if you will, the promised land. We were really told we're headed to a promised land. If you think back to those scriptures, and we'll talk about that maybe just a little bit. In my personal study, I've been deep diving back into Eastern literature and Eastern thought and how those books were written and who they were written to and how you can take the information there, and if you really start to understand the culture of those semi-nomadic bands of people that were called the Israelites before they were Israelites, okay, you can start putting together some things that kind of make sense about the story. And so I'll remind you, I think I've told you this, that when a Western mind like us, when a Western mind reads these scriptures, we tend to look at it through Western education lens and how we've been brought up and taught to look at things. We apply the scientific method, okay, and we think that we're reading a book of put together facts that will explain what happened and how it happened. Does that make sense? What happened and how it happened, but that's not the way it was written. It's not how it was written at all. In fact, it was written in a very different form. And the real issue behind these early ancient scriptures, mainly found in Genesis, on up through the Torah, the emphasis is not on what happened and how it happened, but on who and why. And the who we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, of course, is Yahweh or God. Okay, that's who. And what is trying to be revealed, okay, to these people, along with who, it would be why. And we might even slide in there and how. How is this God different than all the other gods? An interesting fact is when the Ten Commandments came out and talked to, says, I'm the Lord your God, you shall have no other God before me. What do you hear there? It's going to get uncomfortable probably, but what do you hear there? There are other gods. Now, whether those gods are man-made or part of some spiritual realm that we don't understand, I don't know. Not really the point. The point is I'm the one. I'm the creator. I'm the God, and you put no other gods really before me. And so the who is Yahweh, that. And the why is love. So the story that we're to trust that is connected to these 12 steps starts way back then, at least for a believer. And what begins to unfold in these scriptures, these documents, and they're written in a certain style. The style is called chiastic, prose. Don't worry about that. There'll be no test, There's no test at all. But what that is that's a type of literature that can fold up on itself. And so it's patterned one side down the other. But the point is it points to the middle theme, the idea. Does that make sense? So as you're reading through those scriptures, you can kind of get used to finding the main point. And it's kind of a fascinating thing to do. You know, it's not exactly like poetry, but poetry is something that we're kind of familiar with. So no one would really take poetry and then read it and say, well, this is literal. This is how it happened and what happened. We wouldn't treat poetry that way, right? And so we have to be very careful we're dealing with scriptures, is sometimes that's exactly what's happening. It's like we take poetry and then make it literal. And that's just one example of kind of what we're talking about. Not really the main point, but I kind of got off on that because that's what I'm doing. So you have to sit through that stuff when I get off on that. And these early scriptures in Genesis, the creator of the universe is revealing who he is in relation to who we are. And I'm not going to go through everything, obviously. I got something in my mind that's kind of cool, but we'll get there. So we learn early on that this God can create. He is a creator. And as he's creating, it's good and very good. We've been tagging on to these ideas. But what's interesting there is that God knows when enough is enough. When enough is enough. And so having the ability to create or be creative, which we all share incidentally because we're in the image of a creator, having the ability to be creative, also comes with an awareness of when enough is enough. And when enough is enough, we're called, and the center idea of all of that scripture happens to be the point of rest. And we've mentioned this before, how important rest is. So when enough is enough, the creator of the universe rested. And so there's other stories along the way as we go, and you can pull these references out. We're going to jump on to the story that is, interestingly enough, in all ancient literature, you have flood stories. Not just scripture, but in all this ancient literature, there's going to be stories about the flood. Some probably literal, some maybe metaphorical. We don't know, not really the point. But in the flood story, in our story, the interesting thing is that not only does the Creator, know how to create, but the Creator can also and knows how to destroy. But the same idea applies, that if he destroys, he also knows when enough is enough. And so the real idea and story there behind the Noah adventure, okay, is part of that. So we have a creative creator that knows when's enough. We have a God that can destroy but knows when enough is enough. And the covenant that he set between mankind, represented by Noah, which means comfort, okay, a name which means comfort. Okay, the covenant that he set between mankind and his ability to destroy, okay, came after that flood and said, I will not destroy. Even if the desire and the heart of mankind is pointed towards evil or pointed away from that which I really want or desire, which was the good and the very good. Even if that's the case, I will not destroy. We can trust the story. In fact, he set a sign in the heavens. Do you remember this? It's kind of interesting. There's no mention of rainbow actually in the scripture, but that's kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So we say rainbow, but they set a bow, in the sky. It probably was a rainbow. But it was a symbol in that culture, which was something called the suzerain vassal relationship, which means the conquering or the big bully on the block, who had all the power. If you paid tribute, if you would pay your taxes or your tribute to the big bully, then you got protection. Pretty common idea, right? And you needed protection occasionally from bandits and maybe other warring, factions out there. And if you needed that, then you would go to it's called a suzerain. It's like a Freudian lord of the manor, which at that time was Egypt. And you could call upon Egypt and you could present this bow, which was a symbol of, I've paid my tribute, now you owe me protection. Makes sense? You are going to stand in for me. You are going to keep me from being destroyed because I've paid my tribute. And so it was the vassal, it was, the lower that had to pay the upper, and then he was given that token and he could produce it to get that protection. What's interesting about the flood story is that's reversed. It is the upper. It is the creator. It is the God who says, the bow points where? The bow points to him. The article of war that would, he points it towards him. It should be, if in a regular relationship of humanity, the bow would be pointing where? Down toward us. Because we are the lesser. We are the ones to pay tribute. We are the ones that must honor. We are the ones that must worship. And in that way we would be paying the tribute, and we then could get the protection. You with me? But no, he reverses the whole thing. And he says, even when you will not honor me, even when you won't pay your tax or your tribute or any of the other things, even if that's the case, the bow points where? To me. I will not destroy you. That's the story we can trust. The creative nature of the Great Spirit, and then the love, the why, the love that he shows through those scriptures, and saying, no, that's how it's going to be. And so he's revealing to us a nature that is opposite of the normal cause and effect that we tend to think of. this continues on. He goes and he picks this guy called Abram. We mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. We'll play on that. Now, a fascinating thing about this guy, Abram, he changed his name to Abraham. You remember all of that. Well, they were, out in their, where they lived out there in Sumerian desert type areas. And it talks about his father, and Abram's father, and it said had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So there was 3 boys. And the oldest, Haran, ended up dying, and his son was Lot, or Lot is what it's actually pronounced, but Lot we've heard of. But there was 2 other daughters. One was Sarai. Okay, one was Milcah, I think. Milcah, something like that. Well, we know that Abram married Sarah. And this is kind of interesting that most people may not be aware of, that he married Sarai knowing that she was barren, knowing that she could not have children. And this on the cusp, on the after of being told and promised, remember, trust the story, you're going to be a father of many nations. And at least the rabbinic teaching is that Abram was chosen because he was willing to take Sarai, even though she was barren. She had been returned to her father's house, is how we know. Otherwise, she would be, already in a relationship. And he took her anyway to protect her, and because he believed it was the right thing to do. So this is the kind of guy then that God says, I choose you to be the father of this faith nation that will outnumber the dust particles of the universe. Now, don't get way ahead of ourselves thinking Abram's just all that. No, he's just like me and you. He messes up, and that's the beauty of the story that we can trust. So he chooses Sarah. She's barren, and then, God says, now, take all your stuff, head out, go this direction. And so he does. He packs everything up, but it's kind of interesting because he takes Lot with him. Why does he take Lot with him? Lot can stay there with his, grandfather and his other uncles. He's in that household. It's not necessary, but he takes Lot with him. Okay, because the only common sense, the only way he can be a father of any descendants would be through Lot. So he says, come on, you're going with me. I've been promised a lot of descendants. Obviously can't happen, with me and Sarah, so you're coming here. It will happen through you. It's an interesting little flavor of the story, isn't it? So Abram is helping out. Does he trust the story? Yeah, he kind of trusts the story, but I better give some assistance. Because this great spirit, whatever is talking, he may not know exactly how everything works. Barren wife, descendants, that don't add up. So I'm going to take Lot. And they set off, on this journey. And I won't go too much further, but this one's pretty cool too, because we can already see that Abram is really kind of starting then to look like me and you, right? I listen and I'm okay. I'm in. I'm gonna believe, but I better have my hand in this planning thing too, because after all, that's the only responsible thing to do. So they're rolling along, and I'm skipping some stories, but that's because that's what we need to do. But you remember that the time that there came a great famine in the land, and they had to go to Egypt. So when there's a famine, guess where everybody goes? Egypt. Does it make sense? Why would everybody go to Egypt when there's a famine? All the time, every time, even now. Well, what's there in Egypt? Yeah? They got a big old river that never runs dry. And you might be interested in this. That Nile Delta is massive, and it floods every year. Floods every year and goes back. The number one rated topsoil in the world. You want to take a guess? In Egypt. The Nile Delta. The Mississippi Delta is pretty good. It's got some pretty good topsoil. I think I hear 7-8 feet maybe at the most. The Pacific Northwest has got some real good topsoil. About that, 8 or 9, maybe 10 feet. The Nile Delta.
What is topsoil?
Topsoil is the soil that you can grow stuff in. That's on top of like the bedrock, the earth. So topsoil is like that garden soil, dirt. Cultivatable dirt. Nile Delta, this kind of blows my mind. 100 feet. It's got 100 feet of topsoil. So where do you go when the famine hits? Well, we're all going to Egypt still. Okay, that's where we'll all end up if there's that big of a famine. So Abram does that. He takes, you've been going for how many years? Don't know, but he ends up going down to Egypt. I don't know if you remember this story, but he stops and he tells Sarai, who's a nice looking woman, who actually has to be, she's a little bit younger than him. So, okay, I'll freak you out with this stuff. It's actually his niece. Okay, Sarai is, his niece. Don't panic. It's okay. It was okay back then. Can also be called, because the horizontal familial structure, back then, everybody that went this way is also a brother or a sister. Okay, we do that today. If you go to church, you go, oh look, there's old brother Smith. Well, there's sister Susan. I mean, we still do that kind of stuff. But in families, that's horizontally, everybody was brother and sister, as well possibly as being niece, nephew, cousin, daughter, something like that. Make sense? Also vertically, a father is any male that's in the direct line. So my father could be my great-grandfather, or my grandfather, or my father. Wouldn't be my uncle. Okay, my uncle would be in another line. Does that make sense? So in my father's house, there are many mansions. So this is languaging that makes sense to these people. A little bit more so than us, because we don't talk that way as much. We think father and we just go kind of one step, but ancestral father goes up this way. So anyway, back to the story. So Abraham, they're going down to Egypt. Sarai's nice looking, and he goes, listen, let's do this. Because they're going to, the Egyptians are going to see you're fair, and if they know that you're my wife, they're going to kill me, and then they're just going to take you, and the story's going to be done. Okay? Again, you see kind of what's happening? He's helping the story along. So what we're going to do is say, you tell them that you are my sister. And it will go well with me. It will go well with us. What's he talking about? First of all, that's a half-truth. You ever told a half-truth? I've told quarter truths before. Maybe even tenth truths. That's a half-truth because in that she is his sister, but also, his wife. So he's honestly being deceptive in that situation. And also if it were, his sister, the custom would be then they would pay tribute in order to, court her, to which he could decline. Does that make sense? So he's going to get property. He's going to get gifts with this plan. And he's also going to be able to control the situation. Little problem came up. So this was the plan. They go in there, but here, what happened? Do you remember? Pharaoh. And Pharaoh ain't got to play by any rules whatsoever. So Pharaoh sees her and he just says, "Thank you very much." He didn't count on the one person in the land that really didn't have to follow protocol. He didn't count on that. It was like, uh-oh. So Pharaoh takes Sarah. Now here it gets fascinating. Because if you read the story, then what happens? It says the Great Spirit sent all types of maladies, illness. Stuff ain't going well. Okay? The second Sarah comes into they didn't even marry yet, but the second he's taken her and they're going to do that, things kind of get ugly. To the point that it's like, what is going on? Eventually, Abram comes clean and says, it's really my wife. And so Pharaoh was like, what did I do to you? What is the deal here? And as you know, he said, take your wife and all of this stuff, okay, that I've given to you, and what? Go. I mean, clear out. Now it's almost humorous. What does that look like to you? First of all, Abram's just like me. I think I have to assist. I've got to assist instead of trusting the story, and I'm going to do my own thing. It's going to go well with me, and then all of a sudden, boom, the whole thing backfires. But then at the end of the day, I'm still rescued because of God and the direction that bow is pointing. I'm still going to take care of you. That's the story. So they leave Egypt quite wealthy, okay, but at the same time, a lot of Egypt comes with them. It's pretty easy to take your family out of Egypt. It is not easy to take Egypt out of your family. Think about that. Because what's coming a little bit later on? Well, there's an Egyptian handmaid named Hagar. So, Abram, what are you learning along the way? Please wake up. So there's almost, can you see these series of, I trust the story? And he would go back and trust the story. But then as time went on, it seemed like, I need to help. And this was just kind of maybe, one of the instances. We serve a God that we can trust. The problem is he just does not lay it all out in front of you to know. There's probably good reason for that, because I'd mess it up. If he really told me everything that was needed to happen or going to happen, and you might think that'd be okay. No, I don't think so. I think I'd mess it up. I think there would be a point that I disagreed with the story or the plan. And I would go, even if I knew how it was supposed to go, I think that's part of our humanity. So God is many times maybe silent, But when he is silent, it does not mean he is not there. It just means he's silent. And it's those times that I am called with the utmost calling to trust the story. It's going to turn out like the Creator wants. I don't have the wherewithal to see each move and every move. And there are going to be times. The beautiful thing about these scriptures is it shows us a picture of us. That's who we are. That's what we're. Abram. We're Sarah. We're Hagar. We're all of these. The story even gets, we could even expand on it. We might, if I come back, we may pick up right there and look again how these stories are unfolding, and it's our story. By process, it is the same thing. And so my invitation to you and all who might be listening, trust the story. Amen. Step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening. I take the principles of these steps, apply them into my life, and share them with everybody else. Think of that wording again. Having what? Having had. In other words, you work these steps, you follow this program, what will happen? A spiritual awakening. Got to trust the story, though. And those tough times, like step 4, step 5, step 6, those not fun wrestlings. Yeah. Think about old Abram. Believe I'll help. Believe I'll do it my way. This can't actually be the correct way. I think I'll assist. Trust the story. The spiritual awakening is promised. The promised land is there. We just got to get better at following along.